welcome back into the Return to Heart podcast. We're so glad you joined us for another episode. Today I have my friend Greg Oliver. He and his wife Stacy run a recovery called a ministry. Sorry, not a recovery. They run a ministry called Awaken Recovery down the road in Birmingham, Alabama. So we run in a lot of parallel tracks, Greg. So glad to have you here today, joining us here on a crispy Friday where we can't decide if it's winter, summer, somewhere in between. So we're going to do both today outside. Yep. But in here, we're going to talk about a topic that in one way, I'm so glad we're able to talk about it like we talk about it now. And another way, it's really sad that we have to. Yeah. It's the topic of sex addiction. Right. And so let's just start there. Like you and I have done a lot of work in our own lives and in lives of a lot of people dealing with this. What's a working definition even of that phrase, Greg, sex addiction?
You know, I think that I'll start with just addiction. I think that addiction develops when I am trying to use a process or a substance in order to create a desired result or escape. Like if there's something that's off and I will take something or do something to make me feel better or make me feel nothing, to make this feeling go away or to make me feel complete, then, you know, I lean into that substance or process because it seems like it's doing it for me. I don't usually lean into things that are immediately painful. I usually lean into things that are pleasurable. And they work until they don't work. And so with sexual addiction, it's just taking that overall strategy of taking something to either fill the void or not feel the void, and the something that I run to is sex, sexual release. There's one of the most powerful physiological experiences that we have, and so for a while, it seems to do the trick.
Yeah, for a while. There's the catch. We've often used a definition around the 10-man world that addiction is an impaired way of attempting to have a full life without paying the price of feeling fully. Right. And man, addiction, as you said, forget what the word is before the word addiction. Addiction is a counterfeit way that feels like, for a while, that I'm actually doing that. Like, oh, this is great. I don't have to have feelings, and this lets me live in this world where it's just pleasure.
Can I even back up a step before that and say that because of some of the work that you guys have done, and particularly you and Jeff and the Emotions Unveiled Bible study that we use in our community, I think that gets to even the preceding days of what develops into an addiction, because so many people don't have the capacity to really identify the feelings that they're having in their lives. And when they do, they assume that they're bad because they're hard. And we refer to negative emotions, which I actually don't think there is such a thing. But they're emotions that are hard and that they don't feel good. And so I am trying to change my scenario instead of realizing that this is part of living the full range of how God made me. And so we're just kind of going through life assuming that the way I'm feeling, there's something wrong with it.
Yes.
And the reason why that gets reinforced is because we're just processing all that in our own heads most of the time, and not talking to other people who can say, oh, yeah, I feel that all the time. And like, I've even come to realize that it's not that bad. Yes. And so in the spiral of our own brains, we learn these strategies. At least that's how it worked with me.
Same. Yeah, addiction makes so much sense logically. It's like that thing delivers exactly what it says it's going to deliver. Relief, anesthesia, numbs me out to things. And
doesn't require anything of me, right? No honesty, no vulnerability, no risk.
That's right. Yeah. Then when you add that word to the front of it, it's like, well, wait a minute. Alcoholism gives me a terrible liver. It's a cause of cancer, auto accidents, falling and hitting my head and dying. Like, boy, there's some terrible things that can happen with alcohol addiction or drug addiction, or I can lose my entire fortune in gambling addiction. Right. And sex addiction is like, hey, what is not to like? Right? So that's one of the hooks of sex addiction in particular, where your entire ministry is built on helping men and women who are dealing with that. And ours is, we have a ministry that we want to help people across a gamut of situations. And a big percentage of who we deal with is dealing with this.
Of course. And I mean, with sexual addiction and, if you're a man dealing with unwanted sexual behavior, I mean, there's a phrase I've heard a lot. I mean, our crack pipe is attached to our body and it's always accessible and you can begin to get involved in compulsive sexual behavior without spending any money, without involving any other people in the privacy of whatever room you want to go and hide in. And it's so powerful because the neurological, the chemical release and the rush that comes with sexual activity, it really is as powerful as some of the drugs that people get addicted to. It's some of the same drugs and chemicals that people get addicted to. And it's hard to overstate, maybe impossible to overstate its power.
It really is. And kind of on that theme, Greg, it really does feel like a tsunami, tidal wave, whatever metaphor you want, because of what you just said. And, the low-hanging fruit on this is the accessibility.
Yeah.
It's, and we've heard this over and over, we've said it over and over, and it probably bears repeating. Back in the day, you had to kind of work for it. And now, in literal terms, this is not a metaphor or analogy, in literal terms, it is everywhere.
Right.
It is billboards and et cetera. So,
well, we're men of a certain age, right? And so when we had to access porn through paper magazines, that you had to go into a convenience store or a bookstore and you had to actually be seen or risk being seen grabbing this physical thing that you could then get caught with by your parents.
That's right.
That the fear of getting caught is really what kept my addiction from escalating sooner than it did.
Yes.
For me, it really took that first big, huge categorical leap in the mid-'90s when I was in my mid-20s and I got my first computer with internet access. And then we were off to the races. So you fast forward now, I mean, that was 30 years ago. I first got my computer with internet 30 years ago. And now there are men coming into our community of recovery who have never breathed air on a planet that didn't have iPhones and high-speed internet all the time.
Yes.
And the exposure that you're talking about is so often involuntary. That's a big key component because I heard about porn and it made me curious and I pursued it, whereas so many of the men in our community now had somebody take a phone and go, hey, look at this. And before their body had begun to sexually mature, before they knew how to process it, they saw something and their body went, whoa.
Yes.
And it wasn't prepared for this.
Yes.
And so it's tragic. The one positive flip side of that coin is that young men are getting to the point where they feel hopelessly addicted when they are still 19, 20, 21 years old and are asking for help before they've dragged it into other parts of their lives that are going to destroy families and marriages and relationships. So there is a hopeful side of something that began very tragically.
That's exactly right, Greg. That's so well said. You see it of all ages. And, the Chinese proverb says, if you want to know what the water is like, don't ask the fish. It's talking about desensitization. Yes. And so we talk.
They're like, what's water? That's right.
And then therapeutic world, I do a good bit of trauma-focused work, and EMDR, that many have heard of, the D is literally desensitization. But now it's happened in the opposite. Young men, young women, as we talked about before, are being desensitized to what is really true, what is true sexual expression, what's the biblical expression, that because they've grown up in this world, that the air they've breathed is like water to the fish.
And not only desensitized to what sexual expression is, but desensitized to what healthy connection is. And we sexualize. I talk all the time about how I've noticed in culture, we equate the words intimacy and sexual activity.
Yes.
And I used to be a worship pastor, and the analogy I use is that's kind of like equating worship with music. You go to church and people say, well, how was the worship? Oh, it was great. I loved all the songs, And what that does is it cheapens worship because worship is so much more than that. And it also puts too great of an expectation on music because it's expected to be the be-all, end-all of worship. Same with sex and intimacy. I mean, we are meant as people, as human beings, to experience intimacy in so many ways, in so many types of relationships with so many people, men, women, family, friends, and the sexual intimacy with my wife, that's one part of it, but it's expected to be all of it.
Yes.
And so we're desensitized and not taught how can we actually move toward healthy connection with God, myself, other people.
Man.
It's so sad.
Greg, I hope people heard that is the best analogy I've ever heard to when you talked about people saying worship. They have a certain connection to that word, and it has become music.
Yeah.
And that is a powerful, I hope, particularly people who are active in church, active in, consistent worship times, how that focus on that word worship gets narrowed into music and how intimacy gets narrowed into sexual expression. That's very powerful. Really appreciate you saying that.
Well, as a former music and worship pastor, it rings with me.
Yes, for
Definitely
real.
rings true.
Say more, or let's talk more at least about Johann Hari, that book, Chasing the Scream, his famous quote, which is absolutely true. And I think one of the wisest things associated with recovery there's ever been. Like he says, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection.
Right.
So I think two guys who deal with this a whole lot with people, we probably need to talk about connection a lot as we're together today.
Yeah.
So what are you seeing? What have you experienced in your own recovery? Talk more about, even in your own story, if you would, around this idea of connection or lack thereof.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind when you ask me that question is I've learned how to not trust what's going on in my own head, at least not fully. Now, I think I can trust it more than I used to be able to because I've learned how to process things in healthier ways. Because I did say earlier, connection with God, with myself, and with other people. But if I'm not working on my connection with God and with others, I'm not going to be able to grow in how I can connect with myself. And I just was talking with Stacy in the car on the way up here about one of the biggest blessings in recovery was it taught me how to process the things that I'd walked through in healthy ways faster than if I would have tried to do it by myself or just with a therapist, and probably more deeply than I ever would have gotten there. Yeah. We were listening to one of you guys' episodes where Todd, I think sitting in this chair, was just reflecting back on ways that he had come to understand wounding his wife and said, man, I can't believe I did things that were that harmful. And I just thought, what a healthy way to acknowledge harm that you did.
Yeah.
Because early in recovery, when I thought about the way I'd harmed Stacy, it was either what a gigantic steaming sack of crap I am.
Yeah.
Right. So taking it to what you guys refer to as toxic shame, or having to minimize it because of the shame and saying, well, I don't know what she's so upset about. I didn't do what that other guy did.
Yes.
Right. And to be able to say, I did some really crappy things. It doesn't define who I am.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the reasons why I was so miserable when I was doing it is because that wasn't who I was. I was acting as a counterfeit person or who I used to be. And I learned how to do that by listening to other men do that.
Yes.
Men with whom I was in community.
Yes.
And so just that connection, really, it's almost synonymous with the word intimacy. I'm allowing myself to be fully known. I'm leaning into fully or more fully know other people, and just realize that, gosh, I'm going to hear things that I can relate to. I'm going to hear things I don't specifically relate to, but it sure does remind me of an aspect of my life.
Yes.
There's no substitute for intentionally creating places where this is where we practice telling the truth.
Yes.
Because for a recovering addict, it doesn't come naturally to tell the truth. I would lie about things I didn't even need to lie about. Because it was like breathing.
Yes. An old crusty guy in my history, early on in recovery, I got recovery in my mid-20s. He told me one time, he's an old Oklahoma guy, he said, son, you'd rather climb up a greased flagpole to lie than stand on flat ground and tell the truth.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, he was right.
And I can so relate to that. Before we started recording, you and I were talking about an experience that I had with an amends that I made. And I found it involved, I had stolen money from the petty cash at the church where I worked to fund some of my acting out behavior so that there wouldn't be a trail. And I knew I needed to make an amends for that. But I found myself even going to that amends tempted to short sell and use the word took instead of stole because it didn't sound as bad. But I had been around enough recovering people who just told it like it was and taught me what it's like to say the thing you don't really want to say.
Yeah.
And then to get to be among and get to be one of the people that just says, man, thank you for sharing that. And like nothing exploded, nothing blew up. And so I think that again, that community, that connection with people who are being real taught me how to do that in really some challenging scenarios.
Man, yeah. I think one of the, I've mentioned that I think before on a previous podcast episode, but that scene in John 13 in the upper room, we do remember that Jesus, as we say, took the towel and the basin and served. What we often will overlook is he also did something else in that room. He said something awkward that he didn't necessarily have to say about what Judas was going to do. And Jesus, say to people, what Jesus is doing there, he is speaking the plain truth plainly. You said, I didn't take the petty cash. Technically, I took it, but it was stealing. I stole it.
Yeah.
You spoke the plain truth plainly.
Yeah, because if I went in and said, I'm going to take that and go buy some office supplies, if I'm going to take it to go pay for something, to fuel my sex addiction, that's stealing because nobody else knew about it and they wouldn't have said it was okay.
That's right. You can buy a stapler, you can go pay for that. That's exactly right. And we, even taking off on this territory of stimulation that we kind of started the front part of earlier, like that's stimulating to take it, even that part, that's stimulating to take that money, steal that money. Isn't it amazing how it's more stimulating to say, well, I just took a few dollars and did something with it, as opposed to, hey, I stole that money and went and acted out with it. Underneath sex addiction sits this cycle around the love of stimulation. I've come to believe, no pun intended with the second step, I've come to believe that so much of what manifests itself as sex addiction begins with this desire for stimulation. Neglected children need stimulation. Overly stimulated children will become sensitized to the need for stimulation. And it's so stimulating to tell a lie and have to cover it. It's so stimulating to have a secret life that no one knows about. So stimulation seems to me to be such a pump for all manner of addiction, certainly sex addiction.
I mean, stimulation, gosh, it's such a deep word to parse and unpack. And again, like a lot of other words, you hear stimulation and you automatically think sex or erection or something, arousal, something like that. But one of the things that I hear more often than anything else, as far as, hey, before you slipped or relapsed or binged or acted out, what was going on before that? So often I was bored, I was lonely. Right? There was a lack of activity, there was a lack of stimulation, there was a lack of connection. And so stimulation is beautiful. Like we sometimes need to have a stimulus to get us off of our butts and move in ways that's good for our bodies. It's good for the world around us. But if I condition myself to require a certain amount of dopamine stimulation that's unhealthy, that's not natural the way that God created it, then I get myself kind of painted into this corner where normal stimulation isn't going to feel good, right? Or where I get so reactive to the stimulation to where it just seems like soon as this thing happens, I'm off to the races. I love, we talk about, you quoted Johann Hari. I use that quote a lot. I also quote Viktor Frankl, who said in between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is my ability to choose my response. And in that choice is my growth and freedom. But we don't, when I say we again, talking about my fellow recovering addicts, we don't think of it as a space. We think of it as like this happens and then before it's even stopped happening, this happens. But if we zoom in the microscope, there's a tiny amount of space. And if we can see that I actually do have a choice, which again, I don't think that I practically really even have it if I'm doing this on my own. But when I ask for help and bring others into it, that space gets a little bit bigger. And I listen to what other people did when they were in that space. And I think, well, what if I did that when I was in that space? And then I begin to have a very different experience with stimulation. Like, it's not being stimulated that's a problem.
That's
It
right.
is, what does that create in me a sense that I need to do or that I need to have? And what if I could get that really good need met in a different way? That at first isn't going to feel as good as an orgasm, but it's actually going to give me what I need. And so long term, it's going to satisfy me in much better ways.
That's exactly right, Greg. I'm there's a lot on the table. You put a lot on the table just with that. It was beautiful, though. It's like,
I don't usually give short answers.
No, they're great. Like, these are you're talking about the components of how we're made, what we do with how we're made, and that Viktor Frankl space between those two. My son and daughter-in-law have their degrees in applied behavior analysis, so they work with autistic children.
Wow.
So they know a lot about the brain and stimulation. They do a lot of things with children with that, and I have an 11-month-old granddaughter, and all of her toys, most of her toys, are brightly colored. They make sounds, the things light up, mobiles move. So the human brain, she loves those things at bright colors. She'll hit those buttons and make that thing light up again. So the brain is made for that. And an addictive disease, the enemy whose hand is in that glove of addiction, loves to take things that are normal to human. We love stimulation. The brain's made for stimulation. Sex is made to be pleasurable.
Yeah.
We're made to live abundantly, and all those things end up being counterfeit fulfillment, as we call it, to meet that need.
Well, what you're saying right now reminds me of something you said on one of your recent episodes talking about supernormal stimulation, and the cardboard butterfly, Nicholas Tinberg experiment. So go back and listen to that one. I think it was maybe number 15 or something. But you're talking about your grandchild's brightly colored kids' toys. I've got a 4-year-old grandson, and our daughter and son-in-law have done such a good job at researching and knowing what stimulates him versus what overstimulates him. And so minimizing screen time, even the shows and the videos that he watches, not ones that have a manic kind of production style, because the same thing that's good when it's tactile toys becomes too much when it's, at a certain speed, a certain rate, a certain, franticness to it. And so we're talking about kind of the same thing.
Yes.
When we look at pornography, that is awakening the same things in our bodies, in our lives, in our emotions, in our nervous systems that healthy sexuality does.
Yes.
But it's too much. And the overstimulation reconditions us to where the way it was designed to be experienced doesn't do anything for us anymore.
That's right.
And it affects every relationship. It affects how my masculinity or femininity shows up just in not even sexual relationships. It affects every part of me.
Yes.
And the sad part is we don't realize it's happening until after it's happened. And now we've got to crawl out of this big crater.
That's exactly right. And you and I share a love for the neuroscience of period and neuroscience of addiction. There's an area of the brain called the ventral tegmental area that's in charge of releasing the dopamine.
Yeah.
And we do something, and it's called the VTA. The VTA says, that's an awful lot of dopamine for the same thing. I'm going to cut that back a little bit. Well, in addiction, we don't go, hey, I'm not having quite the payoff. I guess I need to stop. We go, I guess I better double down. And we call that increased tolerance in the literature. But what you're describing is like our brains are made for more, for stimulation, and once overstimulated, that will create this supernormal paradigm that we continue reaching for. How many people have you talked to, worked with? You mentioned it earlier just in terms of a sociological change, technological change. If you talk to that started with something and now they're way over here.
All
whether
of
it's
them.
Video, it's 100%.
Yeah, all of them.
It grows.
Yeah, and I think, there's also a generational aspect that I can speak to really quickly. People that are more like my age, I'm in my 50s, versus somebody who's in their 20s now. We talk about porn and masturbation as kind of the two, on-ramps to what becomes compulsive sexual behavior. For me and people in my generation, it was the discovery of our bodies, discovery of something like masturbation, and then almost always pornography came later and was an escalation of something I was already doing.
Right.
Almost 100% of the young adult men that I talk to now were introduced to porn years before their bodies were able to masturbate.
Yes.
And so something that's normal curiosity, that's an expected part of adolescence, it was already impacted and infected by this distortion of God's design for sex before they had a prayer. And so, I think it's important in saying all these things not to paint a picture of, well, he just couldn't help it.
Yeah.
Especially people whose sexual broken behavior has hurt partners or other people, because every one of us who did the things we did is still responsible for the things that we did.
Yeah.
But it's important to understand we didn't do them for no reason.
That's right.
And we, most of the time, didn't do it with the intention of hurting the people that we love.
Yes.
Both things are true at the same time.
That's right.
I hurt the people I most deeply loved, and that's not what I was trying to do.
Yes.
And in recovery, I have to reconcile that stuff. Recovery is a lot more than just stop looking at porn. It's about where did my life go sideways, and how can I get back on the track that God wanted me to live?
Yes. And back to the gap idea. I did that. It caused harm. That wasn't my intent. And in the middle of those two things are a thing called feelings. And so often we stay in the loop because I recognize that, oh my goodness, I've done such damage. I have those feelings about it. So what do I do with those feelings? Well, I medicate those feelings.
Shut them down.
And I continue in the loop of addiction. And so that gets back to how I love how every conversation you and I have had about this, formal and informal, you hammer the need for community.
Yeah.
And that is one of the hidden gems of all the, we could stay here all day talking about this, but that's one of the hidden gems of recovery is not being alone. I think it's one of the most profound statements I've ever read that said, children are not afraid of the dark. Children are afraid of the dark alone.
Yes.
This is part of us. So I love the way you hammer that, Greg. And so when we go, oh, I've done this, I didn't mean to, having feelings about it. If that's left up to me to deal with that gap, I'm probably going to continue medicating those feelings I'm having about what's happened. I'm going to double down on that, as opposed to having a friend to talk to about that.
And I'll even add to that by yes and amen, and then saying, I think that the Bible even gives us a glimpse as to why what we're talking about is the way that God meant it to be, even when it comes to confessing our sins and our failures. Because a lot of people have said to me, well, it's embarrassing to talk to other people about it. Yes. Yeah, it is. There's going to be consequences if I talk to other people about it. Yeah, they suck, and it's going to be bad sometimes. So I'm just going to talk to God, because 1 John 1:9 tells me if I confess my sin, God's faithful and just to forgive my sins and cleanse me of all unrighteousness. Yes, amen. The Bible does say that, and it is true. But in James 5, it also says, confess your sin to one another that you may be healed. And I think that God has set up a process of confession where he intends us to confess to him, but not only to him.
Yeah.
We need the experience of telling the truth to another person that's sitting across from me in flesh and blood, looking into my eyes with his eyes, listening to me say the most awful things I've ever done. And he looks back at me. I'm talking now about my sponsor when I first told my whole story in 2009. And with tears in his eyes, he said, I am so sorry you carried that by yourself for so many years.
Wow.
And I've never been more proud to be your friend than I am right now.
Look at that, man.
And I will walk with you. That was healing to me in a way that would not have happened if I would have only told God.
No doubt about it.
Community is an irreplaceable piece of health and healing and recovery.
And how many phrases have we heard along those lines? That we read, I think it's Lewis, that said, the most powerful words in human language are me too.
Me too.
But that even goes at a deeper level, that when that man looked at you and said that, I'm just imagining that scene, you looking at this man, him telling you that what must have happened inside of you, even deeper and beyond me too.
That's right. Because I was hearing Jesus saying that to me, channeled through the voice of my sponsor, my friend.
That is powerful, man.
And God knows that that's how he's chosen to do it. And I don't fully get his economy or how he does it. And I don't have to, which is the cool thing. Like he cared for me with me just stumbling into this, not even knowing that I was doing a good thing.
Greg, you and I have talked about this too, kind of off the grid, but I'm very aware, and I know you are too, every time I'm behind this microphone, there's every chance in the world somebody's listening that really needs to hear it.
Yeah.
That the Lord may use this and the Awaken podcast and others to provide healing. So what do you want to say to that man or woman who stumbled upon this thing or listens regularly or whatever? What do you want to say to the person who is on the cusp of what we're talking about today?
You're feeling something right now that's saying, reach out and ask for help. Mm-hmm. And very quickly, there's going to be another voice saying, no, you don't need to do that, or it can wait.
Great call.
There are going to be competing voices. Mm-hmm. And I would say, trust the one that's saying, what I've tried isn't working. And just listen to me say, I know how scary that is, because to try something that we say will work means that somebody else has to know.
Yeah.
And that is one of the most terrifying things until you've done it. And it doesn't stop being scary after you've done it, but it becomes less scary. Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier to bring somebody into it the second time than it was the first time. Yes. And then easier the third time than it was the second time. And so asking for help is really the only doorway that we can walk through that's going to lead to what you've been trying to do on your own. And so I would say, if there's a part of you saying, reach out and say, I need help, is just do it. Do it right now, because you're hearing from God. You're hearing from your true self. The part of you that wants to be well, which is the true you, is telling you with clarity what you need to do. Yes. And by the way, if you talk yourself out of it and you don't reach out for help until a year from now, nobody at 10 Man, nobody at Awaken is going to say shame on you.
That's right.
We're going to say, I'm so glad you reached out, whether it's today, whether it's a year from now, whether it's 10 years from now. I'm just inviting you to spare yourself more of the pain and more of the damage by reaching out now.
Yes, right on. That will end with something that sounds so very clinical that really isn't. Years ago, the American Medical Association was arguing about addiction being a disease. No, it's not a disease, and so the American Medical Association's own criteria says that a disease is something that is observable. Well, this is certainly observable.
Yeah.
It is progressive. It's certainly progressive, and can be fatal if not treated. And this thing kills people.
Yeah, it does. Literally,
people die from this.
Yes,
and so this is a very big deal. And so this is not nearly as much a pitch for Awaken or 10 Man as it is kind of a plea to say, I love how you said that. The grace you said that with. Please reach out. And maybe you'll reach out a year from now. That's okay. Just reach out. So, we live 3 hours apart and don't spend enough time together. Just love having you here today. Thank you.
Yes, I co-sign on that. I hope we get to do it more.
Me too. Thank you, Greg. AwakenRecovery.com.
Yep, AwakenRecovery.com. And whatwereallywant.show is how you can find the podcast. I mean, you can get there from our website, but What We Really Want is named after that Johann Hari quote. Because what we really want is connection. And also from something Michael John Cusick said in his book, Surfing for God. So, find us either one of those ways. We'd love to hear from you, and hope that just when you hear from us, it'll be encouraging.
That's fantastic. AwakenRecovery.com, 10men.org. Thanks for listening today. Hope it is helpful. And I'll just end with this. If you're listening to this, and I really want you to hear what Greg had to say, call someone that you believe you can trust to start your journey of healing. Amen. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks again for joining us on Return to Heart. To access resources mentioned on this program or to find out more about Tin Man Ministries, please go to tinman.org.